already many projects heading down the road. PacifiCorp is proposing to fund and or advise and or partner with communities so that Oregon doesn't miss out on this opportunity to reap the system benefits and the learning outcomes, along with the localized community benefits that that make CBREs special. Because I would guess that project managers are probably not thinking too much about grid benefit. They're probably thinking about community benefit of their CBREs as they should be, right? And they're not thinking about learning opportunities necessarily, that are inherent in, at least in connecting batteries of this size to the system to try to quantify benefits that they might bring. So they likely haven't even thought about too much about cost effectiveness of these projects because they're about to be handed a big check by Odo or by Energy Trust of Oregon. So, we know that the funding is there now, but it won't be around forever. So I to the extent that we can learn from these projects now, I think that we'll all be in a better position later to be able to discern the real values of each of these stackable benefits, if that makes sense. So this, these straw proposal recommendations, are seen as a way to, to stretch our funding much further and to take advantage of the position that we're in as a utility, because the utility can, be thinking about the added benefits to the system and report out on how future projects might be better able to pencil out. We had an entire subsection of our clean energy plan on, the CBRE's subsection that focused on costs and benefits of that particular type of project, and there was also the the Odo study on small scale renewables and CBREs that was published last year. And so this straw proposal seems like it's the best method a utility can take that will see to it that all the benefits of a project are actualized to to, at least in the future, to offset the higher relative costs of CBREs. So I already mentioned earlier, albeit kind of quickly, that just how important the second and third aspects of this straw proposal, number 2 and 3 here, seem to be, especially at this particular moment in time. PacifiCorp has been, we've been getting asked about what we'll do about the funding opportunities that exist out there for communities, and and then at the same time, we're, communities are coming to us and asking for expertise and help with grants, and and this is an attempt to address both of those within the proposal here today. So based on how these 3 bolded and in box approaches play out in the first year of this rollout that we're proposing. So we're also leaving open the option to fold in some direct funding of projects in the more, I keep using the phrase, the traditional sense, this number 4. And then after the second year of this, this proposed pilot, we'll go through a review to determine if we need to make changes with scope or direction. And, so I say that to let you know that this is, this is the beginning, not the end. And so I don't know if there are questions at this point.
Yeah. Thank you, Ryan. We do have a couple of questions in the chat that I'd like to raise to the group. And some of it I think has been addressed, but we love details. So the first question is how large the grant program will be. And the second question is around how Pacific Power is supporting or investing in the grant programs, and how Pacific Power is planning to make them more accessible or successful for communities. And then again, just another note that some of those topics were touched on, but details are always welcome.
Okay. Well, I actually have some additional details on a subsequent slide, so maybe I'll push slightly. Thank you, though. Those are, they're very good questions. The next slide, I think, is 16, which is really just a timeline representation of what the proposal would look like you can see at the top in the peach and the green, the thinking around rolling technical study requests and grant matching partnerships, and then what I think might be worth noting is that the green, the support of of projects that are quote unquote in flight, and how that might contrast in timing with the that more traditional grant application that you see down at the bottom. That's the earlier data accumulation and the opportunity to learn, I think is pretty critically important there. And then I think what might help with some of the questions that folks have is this next slide, 17. So this one is busy, I admit, but I felt like it was kind of nice to get a lot all in one place. And I think what you haven't seen or heard from yet is I think what was asked about this proposed the possible funding request down toward the bottom of the screen. So one thing I'll say there is that there's a bucket of funding that's still available that was previously approved for use by commission for that the battery storage specific pilot that that we're hoping to to reimagine, and so the plan would be to return and ask for an additional $1 or $2 million of funding that would be used to support CBRE projects across the service territory. So I would say that's maybe feels a little meager in comparison to what Odo has to work with, but of course our funding is coming from a different source. So if we're, I guess I'll if we receive approval to leverage the dollars of ratepayers that live across the entire service territory, then speaking to what we're proposing, it seems particularly important that some of the benefits are leveraged across that entire service territory also. So I don't know, forgive me, I'm not sure if that would really have directly answered the question.
I think I'll yield to the questioners on that, but it does look like it does answer Pat's question. But if any other SMEs would like to jump in to provide additional context, great. Otherwise, we can move forward and hear the rest of your items.
Okay. Well, the next slide, 18 is an admission that that was a lot of information, and I was trying to speak quickly so that we would have some time, for a little bit of dialogue here at the end. So I have a couple of questions. The first is very, general. If there are, initial thoughts that folks have about, what they've heard, and I'd like to collect those here and now. And I'll note maybe that, this is not the only time that you'll have to provide feedback. If you'd rather, look at the details on these slides after the meeting and collect up your thoughts, you can share your feedback at any time. I'll have an email on the screen here in a minute. And I do have actually a particularly specific ask as well. So Tag, if you could animate the next, yeah, there we go. The second question is about, I don't know, how these opportunities should or could be, I don't know, parsed out to communities. So I don't know, I'd love to hear any thoughts that anyone might have about how best to do this, because, especially in light of the fact that projects are, often pushing up closely against submission deadlines. And there's this, as I mentioned in the question, the time sensitive nature of this.
Welcome any thoughts, both verbally or in chat. And as Ryan mentioned, you can also follow up throughout the presentation or after the presentation, should you want additional input or have questions.
If you animate one more time, tag, then folks will see the email.
And before that, it does look like Claire has something to add. Claire, okay. We hear from you.
Hey, thanks all. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Fabulous. I guess I just have a clarifying question. A couple, I guess two clarifying questions, and it might be helpful if you go, can you go back one slide? Is that okay?
It's okay with me.
Awesome. Yeah, so when you're saying, for example, alignment with other efforts over there in intended pilot outcomes, and then you have the, in the parentheses, the CREP grants, recent legislation, is that like just an example, or are those limited to those?
No, not limited. You know, I would say that, you know, when we look out upon the landscape, you know, we see a lot of different moving pieces. And so, you know, part of what we'd like to do is to prioritize projects that, you know, that seem to be already in motion, so as not to miss out on the opportunity to, you know, to maximize the benefits, I guess I would say. So, you know, there are, you know, in addition to what's in the parentheses there, you know, there are projects that have, you know, stepped forward to us, you know, individually, you know, with interest in funding opportunities or in the project that they're, you know, they're proposing to push forward. You know, there are other projects that, you know, that the Energy Trust of Oregon has, you know, identified that were, you know, some of which were included in our clean energy plan, you know, potential study, and others that weren't, that are more recent than that even. But I would say, you know,
I was just saying that makes sense. Thank you. So like, it's like a matching opportunity here is what you're saying. Take full advantage. Got it.
Essentially.
And then on the next slide, I just had one clarifying question too, that if you go forward, back forward. Yeah. When you're talking about prioritizing community need, using localized resilience metrics, I think there's a couple like various types of resilience metrics. I was wondering if you could just clarify which type of metrics you're referring to, and then is that kind of like how you are going to prioritize the pilot program in terms of like what comes first, or like, you know, what comes first, next, that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, so that's part of what I'm, you know, that's why I lobbed this question up to the group here today, because it's hard to, you know, without stakeholder and community input to, you know, to easily determine at least which of these bullets or others that you know, weren't included would or should be how we prioritize, how, you know, the order in which I suppose we would partner with, you know, with communities to advance projects like these. You know, we have our, you know, our asset management team. I don't believe they're presenting today, but I think that they have in the past. You know, they're hard at work, you know, developing, you know, a series of overlaying resilience metrics that, you know, that will be used by us as we further develop, you know, this work, as well as, you know, other teams within our organization that are going to be working on, you know, resilience, you know, based thinking. And so it's, I don't know that one of these ways would or should be better than another. You know, I mean, I guess how we have been approaching the current version of this battery storage grant pilot is most akin to the first come first served version of partnership, where, you know, if a community comes forward with, you know, a site that they'd like to learn more about with a feasibility study, you know, as long as it meets the criteria, you know, we don't say no, you know, and we haven't come across an issue where we had more interest than funding, but because of how quickly this landscape seems to be changing, I'm starting to worry that that might be the case. And so I wouldn't want to, to start handing out these feasibility studies to only those communities that have, the most wherewithal or resources at their immediate disposal that they can quickly, turn the corner and apply. And subsequently leave behind communities who probably would need our help in a greater way than some of those other communities, if that makes sense. And so, I don't know that the first come first served is necessarily the most equitable, but I don't know that if we were to say, come up with a top 5 list of of communities or areas based on our stacked resilience metrics, that that folks would necessarily have the even the interest in a CBRE type project. But I'm open to hearing how folks think about prioritization of of projects based on the community or alternatively the the project type and the benefits that it would provide, or the uniqueness of the project. So so this is very much an unanswered question for us, and one we're going to have to continue to work to answer. Long version.
Great question. Any other questions? Otherwise, I did drop the email into the chat for easy
Great.
access for anybody interested in submitting comments after the fact.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time. And please feel free to email thoughts, additional questions, suggestions, so we can make this as good as it can be. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Ryan. With that, I think that we will go to break for around 10 minutes and come back to touch on small-scale renewables, as well as different engagement and feedback items. So looking forward to seeing you soon. On the small-scale renewable section.
Hi, Morgan. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Loud and clear.
Okay. And back up just in case. All right, well, good to join everyone. This is Heather Eberhardt, along with my colleague, Paul Johnson. We're with the Commercial Strategy and Resource Valuation team. We're originators responsible for issuing RFPs and contracting resources in the Pacific Power Territory of Pacific Corp, whether that comes through our planning process, voluntary customer programs, or qualified facility requests. So in the prior engagement series meeting back in June, you heard from the executive leadership in our team, who introduced the need for small-scale renewable and talked through some of the milestone schedules. Apologies for those beeps. We make sure those are turned off. And then walked through some of the key procurement decisions that we've made so far. So we're here today to give you a little bit of an update, but first let's make sure to ground everyone. So what does small scale renewable mean? We're talking about 20 megawatt or less sized renewable resources. The requirement in Oregon is for 10% of the company's generation portfolio to come from these resources, this size of resource, starting in 2030. So House Bill 2021 in Section 37 defines eligible small SmallScale Renewables. And I won't read through everything here, but there is an OES standard that they reference, which is an RPS renewable portfolio standard requirement. It lists all of the eligible types of technologies. If you are thinking about a small scale solar or a small scale wind, I assure you those are both included in that list of technologies. If it's anything else, I encourage you to visit that list and make sure that you understand what is eligible for meeting our requirements. We can go to the next slide. So I wanted to walk through where we're at in terms of the overall engagement and planning process that's leading up to the procurement and contracting with these small scale resources. And then in the next slide, we'll show you a larger span of time that starts with this planning process and ends with the actual development, construction, and those resources, those projects going online. So back in March, we issued that integrated resource plan that Randy spoke to earlier. In May, we finalized our clean energy plan where, it identified our need, the 400 megawatts specified in the last slide as the requirement for small scale renewables. We've been through now 3, 4, this is the 4th engagement series meeting where we've been building up and solidifying some of our plans. As mentioned, you heard from leadership last time, the general thoughts in terms of the schedule and some key components of our procurement. Today we're going to give you an update on schedule. We're going to talk more specifically about eligibility and our contracting process. And then in the next and final engagement series meeting in October, we'll come back with even more specific criteria with respect to both contracting terms and conditions that we've landed on, as well as valuation processes that we're proposing. So we can go to the next slide. This is that timeline that I mentioned. There are 2 key points here. If you start on the left with our planning process and you end on the right with the final construction of these small scale resources, where we're at right now is that current step where we're going through this public engagement process and we're laying out our plans and getting feedback. And this is really the opportunity to see where we're headed and comment on it. The next step is to issue the small scale renewable RFP to the market and, reach out to market or issue the RFP and get feedback. And that we had initially targeted the 4th quarter of this year. We are going to be pushing out 3 to 6 months. So we'll be issuing that in Q1 or Q2 of next year. Then in terms of next steps, there is this very important process led by our PacifiCorp transmission group, and that is the annual interconnection cluster study process. And so if you're interested in offering us a small scale renewable project, most likely you're going to have to go through this cluster study process. The deadline each year, there's a cluster study engagement window that opens, I believe, April 1st and closes each year around May 15th. And then it takes, up to 120 days to get the results back from those studies. So they tend to culminate with a study in November of the same year. So if you're interested in offering us a small scale renewable project, you'll want to make sure you'll go to our OAT, our transmission tariff, make sure you reach out to our PacifiCorp transmission interconnection representatives. There's information on the website, and just make sure that you have your plans in place so that you can participate in that process. And then after we've received the bids and we've evaluated them, we'll determine a final shortlist. And then following our final shortlist and contracting, those resources will be developed, constructed, and they need to come online. Our drop dead is 2030, but in our first procurement process, we're looking to have resources come online between 2027 and 2028. And with that, I'm going to hand off to my colleague, Paul Johnson, who's going to talk a little bit more about the eligibility decisions we've made so far. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Heather. My name is Paul Johnson. I work in resource and commercial strategy for Pacific Corp. And I'm going to be talking here about this slide here. It's describing some key areas of the RFP issuance itself. So what we're intending to show on this slide are some of the main items that we're currently proposing about this upcoming small scale renewable RFP. And these items and others will be further clarified with additional details when the RFP document is eventually completed and put out on the street. And it's typically in the form of a main document that describes these areas that we're showing here in terms of underlying contract and eligibility, but there'll be a lot more additional detail provided when it goes out, including items such as minimum requirements, forms to be filled out as part of your bid, as well as instructions on how to fill out those forms. So this slide is intended just to show some key areas within the context of underlying contracts and eligibility. So the first area here is contracts. We're currently proposing a standard contract in that no individual negotiation of contractual terms would occur. And this is to ensure timely execution across what we think are likely to be multiple contracts as part of this effort. So we believe having a standard contract will assist in facilitating an efficient contracting process within a reasonable time frame. And we anticipate by having a common contract, it will allow for a streamlined contract management and administrative process. So the key point there is as you negotiate, and then after you negotiate, and as you're managing the contract throughout its life, having a standard form of contract will just create a lot of efficiencies and streamline the process. So this is why we're proposing a standard contract. And then with that, we intend to look to a modified form of what we typically send out in a pro forma PPA, similar to what is out there in Pacific Corp's 2022 all source requests for the proposal. So the plan would be to have a modified form of that form. And what we mean by modified is we plan to consider the capability and the challenges of maybe smaller developers and smaller projects. So, sorry, I see a chat in here. I'm hoping, posting the slides. I see the slide on here. So hopefully folks can see the slide that I'm speaking to right now. And it's
yes.
there, but I see it up on the screen.
And I will add that we will be uploading the PowerPoint to the Pacific Power website. I don't have the exact timeline on that. I think it'll be, I think it takes a few business days, but yes, the PowerPoint and the recording will be posted online. Back to you, Paul.
Thank you, Morgan. I was on to what I meant by modified in this bullet item, in that we were going to look, give consideration to the bidders and the type of project that we're looking for. So considerations will be given to areas of performance guarantee mechanisms and thresholds, And I'm just throwing out some examples: security levels, timing of posting of that security, liabilities, meaning damages, and milestone commitments. So that's just name a few. So again, we're going to be looking at a modified form of our all source RFP pro forma contract that we think that will address smaller size resources here. So I'm moving on to the next section on this slide, eligibility. We're going to look at technologies consistent with this this statute that's presented here. And so what that means is we plan to exclude behind the meter, energy storage, microgrids, demand response, and other energy related infrastructure, which are not included in this statute. And we're really going to be looking for renewable energy generation resources. We propose 3 megawatts minimum size to ensure energy imbalance, EIM eligibility. Are interested in a project size that provides that eligibility when it can, and with that, if necessary, real-time dispatchability. But having said that, we recognize that smaller resources less than 3 megawatts still have other paths. We think they can pursue under the avenues of community-based renewable energy projects, as well as existing qualifying facilities or QF tariff schedules. We'll be looking for bids that can come online by the end of 2028. And this is to potentially mitigate any subsequent development delays. We don't want to create a deadline that puts us right up against our targets for compliance, say in 2029 and 2030, such that we're putting ourselves at risk or in a position then we're trying to scramble to comply with law. So we are currently planning on issuing an RFP with resources that can come online by the end of 2028. We'll be proposing PPA bids only, no build transfer agreements. The thinking there is multiple small BTA projects, the build transfer agreements, likely require additional capital in terms of post-COD, O&M, and asset management. And you think about that at potentially at numerous discrete sites. And also BTA agreements tend to be much more complex than power purchase agreements. So for this effort that we're looking at in the first half of 2024, we're proposing PPA bids only. And I'll get to another note on that, I think, down here in the slide. Second bullet item on site control. We'll be expecting bidders to follow the rules in obtaining a supported interconnection study. And what I mean by that, there are site control requirements as part of getting that interconnection study. So in terms of eligibility for bidding, we are expecting the bidders to go through the interconnection study process, have a completed study, and by doing that, they'll provide evidence of site control. And there'll be additional details to that in the main issuance that goes out in terms of what type of information we'll be looking at to make sure that that's being met. For co-location proximity rules, this is really looking at the area or providing guidance when individual projects are located next to each other. And this is because we're looking at resources that comply with this 20 megawatts or less criteria in HB 2021. So in terms of co-location proximity, again, for this regard, we intend to follow FERC Order 872 criteria. That's a same site determination criteria. And in this proposed RFP, we're going to be looking for on-system bids located throughout PacifiCorp's service area, no off system bids. The thinking there is off system bids can typically be more expensive to customers and include an additional amount of risk when you look at third-party transmission availability, not just at the time it needs to be procured, but when you are relying on the flow of that power to serve load. So for this RFP, again, that we're planning to put out on the street the first half of next year, we're going to be looking for on-system bids located throughout Pacific Corp service territory. Oversight, and this ties back to a bullet item that I mentioned above. We do plan to allow Pacific Corp to offer benchmarks as part of this issuance. And with that, we do plan to hire an independent evaluator. Recent experience has shown an IE independent evaluator, they can provide a perspective that encompasses all parties' interests and also ensures that bidders are, we have an independent source looking at make sure all bidders are treated fair in the process. So we intend to hire an independent evaluator as part of the small scale renewable RFP.
Awesome, thank you.
So with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Yeah, and we do have one in the chat from Pat. Why is energy storage excluded and hybrid systems provided greater resilience benefits?
Unless somebody else wants to chime in, I don't know what you mean by hybrid systems. But I'll answer to energy storage and you know, we're looking at the statute, and the statute doesn't call out energy storage projects. So that's really one of the key reasons we think we can meet this compliance requirement going out in the market and looking at renewable generation sources.
Yeah, if I could add to that, Paul, a couple other considerations. One is that, you know, with respect to storage, if we include that and we value it, then we want to dispatch it. And then the contract becomes ultimately much more complicated and burdensome. And with respect to, you know, the size that we're talking about here, procuring 20 megawatts and less, we're also concerned that if, for example, you were offering us a 10 megawatt solar facility with 10 megawatts of storage, if you want 1 megawatt over, it may be considered 21 megawatts, and then we wouldn't get the credit for meeting our small scale eligibility for that resource. So there's just a lot of additional considerations there. So for at least the first procurement round, and in terms of our interpretation of the rules, we're looking for small energy generating resources.
Awesome. Thank you for that answer, Paul and Heather. It does look like that answered the question that we have currently. Any other questions before we let Heather finish up the small scale renewable portion? We have one more in the chat from Jenny Hall. Can you provide examples of the kinds of benefits that a renewable generation project that is not dispatchable, i.e. does not include battery storage, on the energy imbalance market?
Could you repeat that?
It is in the chat if you would like to see it for yourself, but yes.
Yeah. I don't know that our team is prepared to respond to that question. at this time, but if there are others from the planning organization that wanted to respond, otherwise we'll take it under consideration and respond as a follow-up item.
I think the only Heather, if you don't mind if I add in and yeah, we can follow up on this, but maybe, you know, within the EIM, ability to deck it if it needs to. But we can follow up with more specifics on that.
Sounds great. Yeah, we will make a note to follow up on that information. Now we'll answer Matt Hutchinson. Does located throughout Pacific Core's service territory include areas outside of Oregon?
Go ahead, Paul.
Sorry, I'm going back to the question.
I'm sorry, I can answer it. I was just, yeah, the answer is yes. Is for any resource that has an interconnection study or an interconnection agreement connecting into PacifiCorp's territory across the 6 states, you know, that will be eligible for consideration in the small scale procurement.
And I did see Matt come off mute. I don't know if you have anything to add there.
No, Heather answered that. I was just going to be available if Heather or Paul wanted to defer to me on that.
All right.
And if there's a follow-up question, certainly. But the simple answer is yes. Our service territory or eligible resources for consideration in the small scale RFP will include those resources in our 6-state service territory that can connect to our system.
Great. Dave Muldahl has asked, could you please expand on how smaller and CBREs may be considered separately? Any differentiation in power purchase rates?
Yeah, so I guess what I would encourage those with this line of question to do is to go look at the RPS standard and note that storage is not a requirement. And then think about the pro forma contract that we're basing upon this, which is an energy generation contract. If by hybrid resources, they mean behind the meter storage, so DC coupled storage, you know, I would say if it's invisible to us and you're offering us an energy product, I don't know that we would prohibit it. We're just not valuing it or contracting to dispatch it. And I guess I don't want to go any further without further understanding the question. So what I would encourage individuals to do is, you know, to follow up with all these questions, and then we'll take it back to the team and consider.
Yeah. Great point. And of course, always feel free to come off mute if you have anything to add to these questions. We have one from Ryan Coakley asking, do projects need to be interconnected to PAC's transmission system to be eligible? Or will projects interconnecting to Pacific Power's distribution system qualify?
Paul, do you want me to take that?
Yeah, go ahead, Heather.
Sure. Projects interconnecting to PacifiCorp's distribution system are eligible. And when we talk about the system, often we say the transmission system, but that's not meant to say it's at a transmission level. So yes, if you get generation level interconnection to PacifiCorp's system, it is eligible. And then I think as mentioned, yeah. Thank you, Ryan, for that question.
Awesome. Looks like we've answered all of the ones that we can at this point. Like I said, we will follow up on any items we did not have the proper teams to answer on the line. But it looks like we can hand it back over to you two, Paul and Heather.
Okay, Heather, did you want to take this one, the next one?
Yeah, I couldn't remember. So in terms of next step,